So let's begin with a quick and very high-level overview of how the internet works. And I mean very high level. We could easily spend, there are graduate programs just to study networking and the internet. It's a very, very complicated topic, especially when we get down to the lower level. But we are just going to ignore that and appreciate the miracle that is the internet, and we'll just chat about it at a high level. So the obvious question here is, what is it? Essentially, the internet's just a bunch of connected devices. And those devices are all sorts of things these days. Desktop machines, laptops, tablets, mobile devices. But then also there's, really fancy refrigerators that are internet enabled. Wristwatches and thermostats and video game consoles and a whole bunch of other things. So there's billions of devices across the globe. How do they all communicate? How are they part of this network? Well, it's a very complicated question, but why don't we start with a much simpler example? What if there's just two computers? I'm at home and I have a friend over. We both have computers and we're too lazy to speak normally by using our mouths and talking. So we decide, you know what we should do? We should connect our computers. So we set up a physical cable from my computer to my friend's computer, and now I can communicate through that computer. Okay. Very silly, but now scale this up a bit. Imagine I have a raging party. 6 more people come over with laptops. Can you believe that party? All of a sudden, I would need a lot of cable, a lot of connections in order to communicate with each of my friends' computers. And then you think about, what if we had 100 laptops and, each one is connected to 99 others? Or what about billions? Obviously, this idea does not work. Thankfully, the internet uses something called routing, where there are physical devices, there are other machines who have the job of connecting my information or my data to somebody else. It's kind of like an old school telephone network where you would dial, I guess you didn't even dial an operator back then. You would just pick up the phone and ask the operator to connect you to X person, and then the operator would patch you through. It's the same principle, just multiplied by a lot, exponentially. So the way that individual machines are identified is through IP addresses. You've probably heard the term before, Internet Protocol. We are not going to go into that at this point. All you need to know is that, my computer doesn't need to know anything about your computer or the billions of other machines out there. Now, this is one very small network here, but the internet in reality is a network of networks. This is still a very tiny, tiny network that I'm illustrating here. There aren't great illustrations of this online, but I'll show you a few. This is from about a decade or maybe 15 years ago. Somebody tried to map a small corner of the internet, not geographically, but just trying to map the connections. And again, this is very, very tiny, a minuscule portion of the internet, but we can see within this small networks that are connected to other networks. See these little starbursts? Each one of those is a network of computers, and they're all connected together to form a network of networks. Here's another example, a very tiny subset of the internet, and it shows that pattern, a network of networks. Okay, so I said the nitty-gritty details really don't matter for us. We don't need to care about IP addresses at this point or TCP. We don't need to really even care about how the data is sent over the internet. All that I'll say about it is that your data makes its way over cables at some point. From my house, I can tell you that, I've got a Wi-Fi network, but that Wi-Fi network is powered by an AT&T cable coming to my house. It's buried underground. It goes along my road. And then at some point that meets up with some other cables and they're joined together. And then there are a whole bunch of undersea cables that go all over the globe. You can actually see them here. And so they're buried underground or in very protective casings deep under the ocean. And that is really the most important piece of infrastructure in the internet to connect us globally. But anyway, my data makes its way along those cables as pulses of light. It's not quite a flashlight being turned on and off, but it's electrons going down this cable. It's really quite miraculous how it all works. Long story short, we don't have to care about it at all. We're going to be working with things at a much, much higher level. So to summarize, the internet is a global network of networks, just tons and tons of different devices that are able to communicate. And the internet's really the infrastructure that makes it all possible. It is the machines, the different computers and devices, the cables, the undersea cables, the fiber optic cables, the municipal networks, the home Wi-Fi networks, everything that's all connected to form this massive web. And it's what is able to carry things and services like email, the World Wide Web, which we're going to focus on, file sharing, online gaming, streaming services. So I kind of think of it as this massive network of highways or freeways around the entire globe, connecting all of our machines, where it's the massive piece of infrastructure. And then there's content that is sent along the internet or via the internet. And one of those pieces, one of those systems we're going to focus on is the web, which is coming up next. So if there's only one thing you take away from this video, just remember the fact that the internet is a bunch of connected computers, and it's what enables us to share websites and make the web work, which is what we care about.